How do you know if you are making the right decision when you are looking for a property and a location in Portugal? Buying a home in a foreign country is filled with pitfalls. In this video, we put together 4 things that we did to help us find a property and a location in Portugal. And at the end of this video, we'll tell you if we have any regrets about our decision. We don't completely agree on this, so definitely stay tuned for that.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're the Unretirees. Last year, as we were approaching the traditional retirement age, we knew we weren't ready to retire. But we also weren't ready to put off our dreams of living abroad and traveling the world either. So today, we live as digital expats on the silver coast of Portugal. And this channel is about living abroad, remote work, and traveling the world over 50.
Buying a home in a foreign country can be nerve-wracking, at least it was for us. We had heard all the horror stories. We didn't want to end up with a house with a lot of problems or in a location that we didn't love. So we did tons and tons of research. We must have looked at, what do you think, like more than 1,000 houses online. Yeah. We spent a ton of time watching YouTube videos and in Facebook groups, and also reading blogs and articles online. But even with all that research, it really still felt like a bit of a crapshoot. So in this video, we're sharing 4 things that we did to help us navigate this process and find a property and a location here in Portugal. Now, this is just our experience, but we hope that by sharing it with you, that will help you in your own search for a home here in Portugal. So the first thing that we did is we made a list. I know that's not groundbreaking, but stick with us because this is the one step that helped us from making a mistake and also helped us find exactly what we were looking for. So there's a few different things on this list. The first is about the house. What are your absolute must-haves? Second is what are the nice-to-haves? And third, what are the deal breakers? Absolutely should not have. And then we did this again for the area with the same 3 questions. What are our must-haves? What are our nice-to-haves? And what are our deal breakers? We checked those 2 lists and measured those against the budget of what we wanted to spend.
So let's talk about our experience in making these lists. In terms of the house list, in terms of must-have, nice-to-have, and deal breaker, the must-have for us for the house was we needed a yard and we really needed office space for each of us. In terms of the nice to have, we wanted to have a property that had an income component or an income property to it to offset some of our expenses. And the deal breaker for us was we did not want to take on a property that required major renovations. I mean, we just had renovations at a house back in the States. We weren't ready to take on another renovation, especially in a new country with a new language, with all new people. We just weren't ready. Yeah, we didn't want to deal with that. So that was our list for the house. In terms of the list for the area that we were interested in, we had a must-have, nice-to-have, and a deal breaker. So the must-have was for the area, we wanted it to be near the coast. We liked the beach. We wanted it to be near the coast. In terms of a nice-to-have, we were looking for an area or a village or a town that was walkable. And in terms of a deal breaker, we did not want to deal with a location that had extreme heat.
Now, this is just our list. Your list might be completely different. But again, when we had this list and a budget of what we wanted to spend, it was easier to dive into the research. And that's the second thing we did is we did a lot of research for a really long time. There's a few things that we did. Number 1, we started with Idealista to look for properties. And from there, we found local real estate websites that we also looked at. We looked at a lot of Facebook groups. We looked at groups for all of Portugal, as well as in the specific locations that we were considering. And the third thing, of course, is that we read lots of blogs and articles, and all of those things were really helpful. Once we had done a lot of research, we discovered that we really had just a few different choices based on what we wanted and what we wanted to spend. The first option was that we could have paid cash for a condo near the beach. Now, this would have gotten us near the beach, which is great, but we would have given up office space and we would have given up a yard. And we didn't really want to do that. We both worked from home, and it was really important for each of us to be able to have space for meetings and other commitments that we have. The second option is that we could have bought a smaller house or a fixer a little bit further inland. Now, this was an option, but it means that we would have been further from the beach. We may have had to give up office space. We may have had to do a renovation, as Matt said we didn't want to do. And we also would have been in an area that got a lot hotter in summer. The third option is that we could have bought a brand new house near the beach. Here in Portugal, there are lots of new construction homes, and they're beautiful and fantastic. But again, there were some compromises. Number one is that we would not have a yard. And number two is that we wouldn't have the income property that we wanted as part of something that we purchased. So with all of those in mind, what we really decided would work best for us is to find a property near the beach with an income property attached and a yard and office space. So in other words, we were looking for a needle in a haystack. But from there, it got even more challenging.
So we looked at our list for the areas that we were considering. Things got even more tricky. So as you factor in, or I should say as we factored in our budget as well as the things we were looking for, frankly, Lisbon and Porto in the Algarve just fell off the list.
Yeah.
And then as we wanted to have a temperate weather climate for us, it took some others off the list. For example, northern Portugal is beautiful.
So
But for us, it was a little bit too rainy and a little bit too cold in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Central Portugal could have been great, but it's too far from the beach for us, as well as it can get a little warm there. And then we really like the Alentejo region, which is the area just south of Lisbon and north of the Algarve. It's beautiful and interesting there. But for us, it just is a place that gets too warm in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, this narrowed down options that we were going to focus on to just two. One was the Silver Coast of Portugal, and the other was the island of Madeira. And the island of Madeira, of course, has a bunch of different areas, and so we needed to even focus further in terms of what areas of Madeira we were interested in. So, for example, for reasons we stated above, Funchal just wasn't a good match for us. But there were three cities within Madeira that really were interesting to us. One was Calheta, the other was Ribeira Brava, and the other was Ponta do Sol. And I'm sure for people who live in Madeira or speak Portuguese, I have just butchered the names of all three of these cities.
We're so sorry.
So the next step was planning scouting trips.
Right. So we actually did a couple different scouting trips. So we knew that there were things that we were going to need to have in place before we came out here to buy a property. The first one is that we were going to need a NIF. A NIF is kind of like a Portuguese social security number. We used a company called Border to set that up for us. It was really fast and easy. We'll leave a link below if you want to check that out. The next thing that we needed to do is that we needed to take all of these homes that we looked at and narrow it down to just a handful of properties to see while we were here. Once we had those, we started reaching out to listing agents. Now, you may wonder why we didn't just start with a buyer's real estate agent to show us all the properties. In an upcoming video, we're going to talk more about the buying process, and real estate here in Portugal works differently. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in depth. But we did start reaching out to listing agents and set up appointments to see properties in person.
A couple of other things. So first off, a bank account. So I know a lot of people open up a bank account before they ever come, but we got the advice, and it was actually the right advice, to not open up a bank account, but instead figure out where you're going to get your mortgage from if you're going to be getting a mortgage, and then open the account at that bank. So this was a big difference for us. One of the other things was we got a referral to a mortgage broker. That was a big win for us. Now, the mortgage broker was able to get a pre-approval letter for us. The process was relatively straightforward and simple, but the loan requirements are a little bit different here in Portugal than they are in the US, and we'll talk about that. Is it in the next video?
I think so.
I think so. So now it's time for us to assess our options. So after we looked at all of these properties in person, we narrowed down the list to just two. First off was a dream home, at least a dream home for us, on the island of Madeira. Now, it wasn't near the coast, but it had a beautiful view. It wasn't walkable, which was not great.
Barely drivable.
Barely drivable. Narrow little roads, all uphill at severe angles. It didn't have an income property. There was a yard.
It was weird. It was a weird yard.
Yeah, it was a weird yard.
The house was so beautiful.
House was beautiful. The kitchen needed renovating, but we both loved the house as soon as we walked into it.
Yeah.
So that was house one. House two was a 2-unit property back in the mainland of Portugal in the Silver Coast. And it was close to the beach. It had a yard.
Mhm.
It came with an income property.
Yep.
And it was walkable to town. It was already renovated, so there wasn't any major work that needed to be done. And but it didn't have the sizzle.
There was no sizzle.
There was no sizzle.
Yeah. We didn't see the sizzle immediately anyway.
Right. So we were really torn about what to do between this house that we really liked, but didn't meet our qualifications, if you will, in Madeira, and this house that didn't really have the sizzle, but really met the things that we were looking for.
And it's worth saying that we love Madeira and we love the Silver Coast. So it's kind of a toss-up at that point of which one would be best for us in terms of an area. So we had these two properties. We loved both of them, and we had to make a decision about which one was right for us. And two things really helped us make that decision. First of all was the list. As much as we loved that house in Madeira, and we really did, we had to admit that when we looked at the list, it really didn't have any of the things that we were looking for. That list not only helped us to remember what we were looking for, but also our goals for moving to Portugal in the first place. We had to admit when we looked at that list that the property on the Silver Coast had everything we were looking for, which seemed really unlikely because it really felt like we were looking for a needle in a haystack. The second thing that was really important for us was a scouting trip. Now, we hear all the time about people who move to Portugal and have never been here before, and it works out great for them. But for us, the scouting trip was really important because no matter how much research that we did online, there is that indescribable something about a place, that vibe that you either feel it or you don't. Now, we love Madeira. We will go back there as much as we can. It's a beautiful place. But when we sat down and really talked it over, we decided that the Silver Coast was just much more our vibe. We love that there are just countless, uncrowded, sandy, beautiful beaches. We love that there's miles and miles of hiking and biking trails for every fitness level, flat ones, steep ones, whatever it is that you're into. And we also really liked that we could just throw our dog in the car and drive not literally throw. We could place gently our dog in the car and we could drive all over Portugal, into Spain, into France, and beyond. And that was just something that was really important to us and our lifestyle. So now that we've made our decision, we're here on the Silver Coast. What do you think? Any regrets?
Well, so I love it here. I love the Silver Coast of Portugal for all of the reasons that you said. Madeira is a beautiful and magical place, and there are times where I will be here and it's just a little bit cold or a little bit rainy, and
or there's too many flies.
And I'll think about Madeira, which is just slightly warmer and it's slightly drier, and there's fewer things flying around, right? Fewer bugs. And I'll think, did we make the right choice? Should we have been in Madeira? But honestly, after thinking about it for a few minutes, I still love the Silver Coast and where we are now. So what about you? Any regrets?
Nope. I love it here. If you want to know more about our first 6 months in Portugal, watch this next video.